Welcome to today's very special episode, where we're diving into a topic that touches the lives of many and mine personally, and yet it's often spoken about in hushed tones or not at all. As a parent, we're expected to be the pillars of strength for our children, but what happens when the weight of that responsibility feels too heavy? Have you ever found yourself struggling to keep it all together, questioning if it's okay to prioritize your own mental health while ensuring your kids feel safe and supported? Today, we're breaking down those walls of silence and addressing the reality that parenting is as much about nurturing ourselves as it is about nurturing our children. I'm so honored to have Nicole Brunton with us in the studio today for a beautiful chat. She is a resilience coach, mental health advocate who has overcome her own struggles with addiction with her son, emotional disconnect as a parent. So grab a cup of coffee because you're gonna need it, comfortable spot, and let's have a conversation that might just change the way you think about mental health and parenting. Welcome aboard The Nichole Show with host Nicole Hamilton. Our task is to educate, empower, and change lives. Join us for stories of resilience and rebirth. Honest talks that inspire and challenge you. Are you ready to make a move? It begins now. Welcome back, guys. Welcome to my first recording in the studio, and welcome to the beautiful Nicole Brunton. I know her as Nickstar, as Nix, two Nicoles. You got double trouble today, to bring some light, some love, some deep, vulnerable conversations. And that's why the Nichole Show's here. So I'm super excited to have you. This is the second time around because our recording didn't work the first time. But it's nice to have somebody actually in the studio to be in person and really go juicy and deep. So I'd love for us to just do a little practice and show people how we normally drop into heart and just see what comes up for us, maybe for our intentions today. For those that don't know us, I am already saying a lot. My ADHD's kicked in, but when I drop into my heart, it makes me super present and helps me channel to be the most present practitioner or coach or facilitator, and it helps me draw in some intentions. And so I just kind of listen, and I take some breaths, and I feel my heart's desires and what's coming up for me to question, to talk about. So
Amazing.
It was much better. So what came up for you? What's in your heart? What are things that you want to talk about today?
I think what's really come up for me, Nick, is I wanted to ask you about when you were in your addiction. I don't know whether it was in your addiction, that's why I'm asking the questions, but when you were going through your separation and what was going on with the kids. So obviously that's something that I've had a lot of struggles with, and being that I know a little bit of your story, but I don't know it all. I guess I'm asking about the mum guilt and where that sort of went for you at that time.
That's a really good question, and thank you for answering. I'm going to keep looking from here to here as I do want to be present with the audience and you. Took a lot to unpack and still does. I still hold a lot of mum guilt in regard to my addiction and then the separation. For those that have listened to some of the podcasts, you would have heard that I had this most profound healing experience when I was trying to get sober with my first hypnotherapist. And in that session, it was a combination of everything. And I literally was there to work on my addiction. But I did, in that moment of clarity and just total shifting gears and the internal click I needed, I saw on, the right-hand side, my life with light and love and freedom, no addiction, and my kids. And I saw my ex and I together and darkness and death. And so I knew like a year and a half before we split up that I was not going to be with him. I came out of that session in a panic to my coach, and I was like, why are you making me split up with my husband? And that was just something I had to process. But I knew that in that moment that our journey had kind of been done.
Mm-hmm.
And we did both get sober, but that pressure, and I got that pressure not only from myself and my ex, he wanted to stay together, but also my parents and family, and people have that belief, like keeping the family together. And I had to really hold strong in the fact that this relationship wasn't serving me and that I was the unhappiest. And Paul Alicio as well, he was my one-on-one coach at the time, and he's like helping me unpack all these things. And one of the best questions I ever had, directed to me is like, what would you tell your kids? Like when you're having these struggled decisions that you're making as an adult, as a parent, as the person that's providing for your kids, like what would you do if it was them in that situation? Like if my child was unhappy but wanted to keep his family together, or if my child wasn't, and I was like, oh my God. And so now that reflection to me just always pops in my head. If I'm struggling with a decision or a choice around my family, I do think about what advice I'd give if I was, because when you give advice to your children, it's so just unwavering and serving of their highest good. And so that's how I kind of reflected. But it took a really long toll. Abby and I got together, and the guilt of that just kept coming back up. Like it did. Like I doubted my decision about leaving their dad. Brody had anger. But the process, I guess, just kept throwing things at me to continue to work. And I was very deep in this spiritual and coaching journey. So I just continued to learn healings and do past life regressions and heal my genetics, and kept coming back to my love. And I went on a Reiki retreat, and, I remember feeling that discombobulation of, again, stay or go. Am I doing the right thing? My kids are a little bit unhappy and not adjusted. And just coming back to my true heart's desires of what was right for me. And my boys were 7 and 4, I think, 4.5 when we separated. But I honestly believe by doing this work and showing them that I still struggled with emotions, with behaviors, and when they were old enough to unpack, and even throughout the time, I would always hold space for them, for their emotions, for their anger. And if I didn't know, I'm going to find out. I'm going to work on that. And so coming back to that, and I always made time to unpack with them, and I do have a good relationship with their dad now, but I always reiterate, I will always love your dad. Yeah. Like even if we argue, even if we're not speaking, even if things are not good, I'll always love your dad. We created you together, and, try to let them know that, I'm never going to make them choose or have a choice there. But there's always guilt as a parent, but it was very apparent coming through that I just had to keep describing to them was making the best choice for me to be happy, to be sober, to be the best person that I could be. And unfortunately, my choice was not to be that best person with him.
Yeah, that's fair. So let's reel it back a little bit then and talk about when they were a little bit littler and you were in the middle of your addiction.
Yeah.
And how, and I ask this because I've never experienced addiction. I literally have no addictive bone in my body. So how do you go about parenting in that space? Like I
can only speak from my personal experience and try and remember. I do have a really fuzzy memory from a lot of stuff back then. But before I was a parent, I used to party on and off. Like it was like, let's go out, let's start on a Thursday, let's go to a Monday or Sunday, whatever. And then we stopped for a really long time. We got super sober. We had Brody and Jacob. And then we met back with some people that were just in that particular universe. And we started again casually, and this is when ice was really rife in across the country now anyway, but it kind of came back in. And so it was something that we would do when the kids were babysat. We would do it on weekends. We'd do it for a night. We would, party, do whatever else, and then, function. It then got to a point in I remember when I turned 30, my granddad passed away, and I used that as a fuck it moment. So my addiction had got quite hold of me, and I found my own dealer. So I wasn't waiting for my ex and I to do it together. And that's when my addiction really became bad. But the best way I can describe it as a functioning addict.
Yeah.
So I actually would have some, go work, go do whatever, have my own business. I'd be like, I'm just going to the toilet. I'd have some, I'd come out and do a spray tan. Like, it was little bit by little bit by little bit. My kids never saw it, but I do remember feeling that guilt, because what it was doing, and the only thing I can reference it to now is the ADHD meds I've tried, like prescription meds. It gives you a numbness for me. So it didn't make me high or ridiculous. It kind of zoned me out and made me calmer and very focused, so I could get up and do the things that I could do because I was so unhappy.
Yeah.
So it became my escape when it was really bad, and obviously I'd stayed up for days and had my come downs. Like, it was fucking with my mind for sure. But the biggest guilt I had, I don't think I was a bad parent. I don't think I ever did anything, that was too irresponsible with them. They were always fed, they were always looked after. It was only ever when they were mostly in bed or away from us on the weekends. However, the emotional disconnect, I wasn't present.
Yeah.
But that happens in mental health, that happens in scrolling and the rest. But I really did hate myself for that. And I'm so glad, because I just wanted to be sober. I just wanted to do it. And in the times that I did relapse after my hypno session, I hated it. The change of my frequency, the change of my energy. So I've never gone back to taking drugs because I don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
But the guilt, for sure. I'm like, did I cause Jacob's autism because I was not present? And, not that I had, and he asked me one time, that broke my heart. He's like, Mum, did you do it when I was in your belly? And I was like, hand on my heart, mate, no, I absolutely didn't. But I do remember him, he would energetically feel it. He was only like a little bubba, and I'd give him a bottle, and he'd wrap his arms around my neck, and he must have known I was going to the bathroom after I put him to bed, and he just didn't want me to. He just energetically knew. So I have had many tears and healings over those moments, and had to come to a really good place of just loving that part of myself, because it kept me safe.
Yeah.
In a fucked up way. It kept me going. I didn't get into dark places of not wanting to be here. And what it did was also help me function.
Yeah.
It actually helped me function. And I know that there were times and places that it was really inappropriate, like stuffing it in my bra, taking it to different places. It did have a hold on me. And I know, and I can see, and I know I just have a radar for it now. I can see people that are on it. I can feel it. I know when the dealers are, and I can see when it takes away from their soul. There's people that you can kind of are they're functioning on it? And then there's people that that have just taken too much, or it's, changed their frequency of their brain, and you can really see their behaviors and whatever else. But for me, my parents didn't even know.
Yeah.
They did it, and they thought I was bipolar because my emotions were up and down, but I was definitely, what I call a functioning addict.
Yeah.
Through that time, but there's heaps of guilt of it. And as soon as I got to this place and started working on my healing, and as soon as my boys were old enough, I started talking to them about my unhappiness, my depression, and when they were old enough, addiction. I told them as much as I wanted to, not every single piece of it, because it's not all their business, but enough to know that addiction's in their genes, not to try those certain things, to always be honest with me. And I've used it as a growing and a learning experience.
Yeah. And that's amazing. Like I said, I never went into addiction, but after I lost full custody of my kids way back when, that's a whole nother story. I did have a bit of a downward spiral, and ecstasy was my drug of choice at the time. So there was about 9 months there where I was using it fairly regularly. And I guess probably because it was cheaper and gave me the same feeling as getting really drunk. And then I would have, at the point in time, my eldest two were quite young, so I would have them every third week. So I had them 33% of the time. And I would normally party in the weeks that they weren't there and then not in the week that they were there. But this one particular week, I remember having a party. There was some occasion anyway. Took quite a few pills that night. And I remember 4 o'clock in the morning, my eldest daughter waking up and going, "Mummy, you're too loud." And instantly I was sober and then never did it again after that. Like ever. Ever. And so, like, there is power in the guilt. I think if that incident hadn't happened, who knows where my spiral could have gone. Do you know what I mean?
100%. I had guilt. I mean, I knew, I've said it a few times in my story, but I remember adamantly smoking an ice pipe and wrapping Christmas presents on Christmas Eve, and then thinking, I hate this, I don't want to be doing this. And fast forward, I did it for a whole year. I was doing it again. And that's about the time that I did break down. I was in the background, going to drug and alcohol counseling and doctors and whatever else. But that's the time I actually admitted it out loud to my mum, which is probably the most powerful verbalization of my addiction to her. And then that January, I'm pretty sure it was, that I went for my first hypno session in 2013. And that's when I got sober.
Yeah.
So like I knew that that's who I didn't want to be. And I don't, like, for anybody that's listening that has suffered with addiction or going through addiction, or if you're a parent of an addict or whatever else, I have to tell you, you cannot jump in, help, save somebody. You can be there and put your boundaries up and honestly reflect back to them if you can see that they're struggling, but they have to want the sobriety themselves. And I had that, and people can find it, but they have to do it on their own time.
Yeah.
And you can't make it for them.
No, and I think on that note, it's really poignant to let the audience know that includes if it's your child, whether they're an adult or still a teenager.
Correct. They're going to do it anyway.
No matter what, they're going to do it. They've got to want it for themselves. And I say that because obviously I've got my own lived experience with that with my son. So fast forward then. I'd really love to chat to you about being a mum of teenage boys.
Yep.
So getting out of the addiction sphere and into what have been the biggest struggles of being a mum of teenage boys?
Honestly, I mean, and I don't want to tell stories that I'm not allowed to tell, so I'm not going to go into too many things. I'd have to ask permission, but the biggest thing is rebuilding that trust. So even though for me, I've said to my boys, you can tell me anything and I'm not going to get angry. Tell me anything and I'll help you fix it. There might be some boundaries on that, but just tell me. And that includes drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever. Like any topic is okay. And I've always opened those conversations with them about anything. And so there's been a couple of things where, a couple of times where the honesty hasn't been there, and then I've had to deal with a situation, and the thing is, I thought you'd be angry at me. And so it's rebuilding that trust of like, I promise you, I tell you, I will not be angry at you. But even when you tell a child that they can tell you anything, as a parent, they're not going to. They're never going to. But it's when they come back in and they've fucked up, made a mistake, done something that's, crossed a boundary, or they've had a lived learning experience in whatever place and space that is. If you can hold space for them and just be so loving and just cuddle them and just say, we got this, and unpack with them gradually so that that trust is there, that's the biggest thing. My biggest challenge is the communication, because they do want to block you out. Like, they want to talk to their friends. My eldest is, work and home, and, I do 50-50. There's a different parenting style in the other house, so that is a challenge as well, but it's the communication. And so that's what I struggle with now as they're getting older. They don't want to talk that much. Yep. So I've got to find the right times and the interactions to continue the beautiful, loving relationship that we've got. So family times, dinners, people that we really enjoy, like when they are with their uncles and stuff like that, the boys come out of their shell a little more. So for me, really having good role models around and making sure that that's a priority, so they do have other people to speak to, because I know that I'm not always going to be the one. 2, to continue to be completely honest and show them that I'm always showing up with integrity and working on myself. So even when I've had down moments, depression, like, jammy days or whatever else, to really communicate that and show them that I can work on that. And then just, keep coming back with love, keep coming back to that space, and, hoping that I'm setting that example, because I can't expect them to do anything that I'm not already doing myself first.
Yeah. So what are your fears? What are your fears when it comes to your boys? And we're obviously talking about Miss Aurora is a whole nother story.
Oh, she's a separate podcast.
But obviously, because my business is focusing on teens, and I have a teen boy myself, although I have almost a teen girl as well. But yeah, what are your fears for your boys in the current landscape, in the current society, and what eats at you, if anything, when it comes to your boys?
I guess the personal one is that they will struggle with addiction somewhere. Like, they'll fall off the rails because, it's in both of their sides, their mum and their dad. So that's one. And yeah, when they're out there in that world, now that they're grown up, like, you don't have any control anymore. And I know we haven't since I've been at school, but that is a scary factor. Like, what is out there? I guess for the biggest one is, if they try, like, I guess the scariest one is drugs.
Yeah.
The scariest one really is drugs. Like, what if they try one? There's fentanyl and things these days, like, an OD or something like that, that's probably, the scariest, or, too much alcohol, them getting out of control, out of their conscious mind, and not being able to be safe.
Yeah.
Driving, I suppose, as well, for teen boys, even though my son's really good, like, that's another, big one. And the third one, and they're not really in any order, I suppose, but just how it's popping into me, is them to be able to talk about their emotions, because I feel like sometimes they bottle them up and they either don't know that they're there or they're not expressing them. And I would hate for me to be unaware they'd be depressed and hurt themselves, like, because that is a big one for teen, or for men everywhere, to be able to be safe enough to verbalize what's really going on inside.
It's such a societal, it's back to that old adage, men don't cry, boys don't cry, isn't it? Or boys don't show their emotion. And I'm hoping that, we have some beautiful men in our lives that have been able to show up like that. And I'm hoping that with the work we do as women, but also the men that are in our lives that do this stuff, we can start to change that narrative in society. It may not happen for our boys in this particular generation, but hopefully going forward, there will be more safety across the board for them to be able to.
And then on the reverse, I work with teen girls as well, and tween girls. I really want to change the narrative in the schoolyards of, leaving people out and bullying and being unkind to one another. It's such a thing that we don't have jurisdiction on. Having children that are lonely, bullied, not feeling worthy, just feeling left out, like, that's probably the biggest things that continually come up for teenagers.
The loneliness epidemic. We're currently in the midst of a loneliness epidemic, and the research actually shows that teenagers are feeling more lonely now than they ever have in their life, in history. And that's fucking hard.
I know, and I was just literally chatting to a little girl about this yesterday, and we have no jurisdiction on school, and I was like, well, what else can we do? And I was literally thinking about that, like, why is there not apps for kids, for meetups, for like good, if they were like same as us, like clearance, checked, good things, and parents could either have some kind of, I don't know, jurisdiction on it as well, but not just sporting clubs or dance clubs, because they can be quite cliquey as well. Where can kids actually go to make real good soul connected friends at a young age, because we don't find it until our 30s or 40s or whatever else? Where can they go if they haven't got friends at school? Yeah. Where do they go?
Yeah.
And if they're not playing a sport, where do they go?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about this yesterday, but yeah, there definitely needs to be a different cultural shift and some communication on, on
on emotions in the school system, and there just isn't. They're not aware of that. So for me, yes, the communication is a big one, and I'm just worrying that, that perhaps your child can't be honest with you about what they're thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
The biggest thing.
Yeah. And I agree with the school stuff. I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole talking about the schools. The one thing that I guess I struggle with the most is when a kid's being bullied, they generally send that kid home instead of the bully. And don't get me wrong, I can see both sides of the coin where, hurt people hurt people. So the bully's got stuff going on too. And the current sort of narrative is we're sending him home for his own safety sort of thing. And my son was a bully, by the way, everybody. So I've been on both sides of the coin. But I'm noticing that the schools are really struggling with being able to deal with these things in a schoolyard themselves. Instead, they're sending a lot of these kids home for whatever reason and suspending them, which for some of these kids is a holiday, let's be honest.
Yep.
But then that's putting more struggle on some of these parents who are already struggling with these kids, and then the school's not supporting them. So it used to be when I was at school that whatever was going on in the home was an extension of the school, and the school would support the family, however that be. It might be literally breakfast club, or it might be, a secondhand uniform, or it might be after school programs, so that they, are just taking some of that off the parents for a minute. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now they're not doing that. They're just almost throwing the kids out. Do you know what I mean?
I've worked as an SSO in schools. You've been in schools as well. You volunteer. We're not having a go at the education department, because seriously, they're doing the best they can with the tools, the resources, and the structure that they have.
And it's systemic. It's
correct. There's some beautiful, SSOs and teachers out there really doing their best because they want these kids to thrive. However, that's why I've created this kids coaching program, because honestly, the systems that we have in disability, education, medical, for me and my personal projection, don't work for everybody. And if we can fill in the niches and be good mentors and role models, that's what I want. I had this beautiful 10-year-old come and interview me yesterday and pick me to be her person. And if I can mentor anybody from that heart space and give them that, that resilience and help them guide them into the place that they're happy in themselves, then that's what I'm meant to do, because I struggled so much as a kid.
Yeah.
I really did. I didn't have friends. I was masking. I changed schools. I gossiped. I carried on. And so I can really understand that mindset and mentality. But the thing is, now on top of that, we used to just go home, work it out ourselves and go play. Kids are now stuck in their four walls. They're not going outside. They're not in regulating their nervous system. They're not playing with their friends. They're on Snapchat or Discord or whatever the app is at the moment, that they're all, at each other. And so the nervous system and the level of anxiety and overwhelm was already there. So by the time they get back to school, that, there's not even a way that a one teacher of 30 kids could regulate or help that whole classroom. So
get
for
them
me,
to do some spinal activation in home group.
Oh, yeah. They need to have so much more holistic healing for sure. But just, that on a whole level. And then, like you said, if parents are struggling, we're in our four walls. If we've got a child, I don't even cope with Aurora when my cup's full, but when she's having a 45-minute meltdown, I need my support systems for her as well. So I can only imagine if you have a child that has massive behaviors, that's, getting suspended from school, you've got to work or, look after the rest of the family and cook and clean and all the things that responsibilities that are on a person to keep your little people alive. Of course, we really need to advocate for parents. We're not here to judge. We're not perfect parents ourselves, but we're literally trying to say there are places and spaces and help out there in different forms. And they don't always, cost money. There are different podcasts, there's resource units that are for free, there's libraries, there's so many things. And for me, I only learnt this stuff from being in this world. When I was struggling with Jake when he was 7, I didn't even know. So we're in South Australia, but there's a resource unit down at Henley Beach for families of neurodivergent children, and it's for public schools, and my kids were blessed enough to be going to a private school, I'd never heard of it. And I ended up working there, and it's a whole resource unit that's free that you can borrow, fidget chairs and wriggle things and books and resources and games and learning technology. All of that is free here. And I'm sure there's other states and places that have, resource units and the rest. But until you go looking for it, you have no idea what's in the community and what's available. It is. And so for me, the biggest fear is that we are getting stuck in our four walls too much. Like we go to work or we go to school and they come back, and whatever their algorithm is on their socials is what you're getting filled with. Yeah. And so that's the scariest thing. And so for me, trying to use social media for good, filling my social media up with good posts and the rest, and being that inspiration, and then trying to fill the gaps that are just currently not working, and showing other families, showing kids, showing parents that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. I think there's another side to that coin too. I had the opportunity, we're originally from the country, as you know, and so one of my youngest little friends come up. So we went and met them yesterday. She was up here for some soccer tournament, very sporty. But there's this other side of the coin where this young girl, she's 11, and she is so super smart that she's bored.
Yeah.
So super smart. And the school is not challenging her. They're not giving her extra stuff to the point where she's starting to check out. Like, don't get me wrong, she's got so many sporting commitments outside of school that she is filling her cup that way, but she's not using her brain to the capacity that it needs to be used for. It's a muscle. And I remember I quit school at year 11. I was a grade A student, but I was bored shitless, and I have probably a little bit of ADHD too, and sensory stuff, like sitting in a classroom of 30 kids just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So I worked a different way to go back to school and do all the things that I've done now that worked for me. But it was exactly the same. I quit because I was fucking bored.
Yeah.
And so these quiet, beautiful, high-level achievers are falling through the gaps too.
100%. Yeah, there's gaps in all areas, and I know myself. I was the one that getting in trouble because I was bored too, and I would listen and I would get the lesson very quickly. I didn't even try. I wasn't a straight A student. I didn't try, but I coasted through, and I got B's and C's and some A's because I didn't have to try. It was very easy. But yeah, there's the same thing. Like it's the way that the systems are working is not for everybody, and we really do need to ask, like, what do you have?
Individual learning plans. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
And yeah, here I am, 43, only just diagnosed ADHD and dyslexic, and it makes so much sense as to why I learn the way that I do and the things that I do. And I wish I'd had a little bit more knowledge and that scientific background to help me with some of the things that I did struggle with back then. It would have made so much more sense.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Hey everyone, Nicole here, and I hope you're enjoying today's episode. I just want to take a quick moment to talk to you all. If you're finding value in our conversations and loving the raw, honest dialogues we're having here, I've got a small favor to ask. This podcast is a passion project for me, and there's nothing I love more than bringing these stories and insights to you. So if you haven't already, would you consider subscribing to our show and leaving a review? It's completely free and it doesn't take much time, but it really helps us in two big ways. It's getting the podcast in front of more listeners, which keeps our community growing. It helps us attract more amazing guests, which means we give you more value in the episodes we bring to you. Just hit that subscribe button, drop us a review, and let's keep these conversations flowing.
when did you know that what you were going through needed to be shared so that other mums don't feel alone? Like, how did you know that? Because I mean, your journey has been so powerful and so heartbreaking all at once, as everybody's probably journeys are. But when did you either get the confidence or the drop in to know that you really, and I've been loving your post lately, it's so vulnerable, but when did you know that you had to share what you were going through instead of stop hiding it?
Yeah, so I have always had the gift of the gab, and I guess I didn't actually, there's always been a little bit of judgment in my head, as in what people are going to judge me for. But I have always shared my story, although albeit maybe not too deep, ever since I was a kid, because that in my childhood, a lot of people, I wasn't listened to. So I had issues with my parents. So from about 13, I would literally talk to anybody that would listen and about anything that would help me connect, right? So it is a deep-seated habit for me to tell my story, even to people that probably don't need to know my story. So that is something that I've had to work on. So with the domestic violence that's been in my life and my son's suicide ideation, criminal activity, addiction, all of these things, losing custody of my other kids, you know, having my littlest one full time, and the ramifications of, you know, being followed and found and you know, all of these things. I always told the story, but I always told it to my safe audience, if that makes sense. And a lot of that was because the people that I was surrounded by, not my safe audience, but, you know, my exes and their families and stuff, judged me so severely that I didn't want to tell my story, but to a wider audience. But when my son was suicidal at 10, so we're 7 years ago now, that's when I started this journey, because there was no real services or resources for him at 10. He wasn't 12, so he couldn't go to Headspace. CAMS in the country was just shit. And I was lucky to have a really beautiful GP, but that's all we had. And my family didn't understand, so they couldn't support me the way they needed. And there was literally nobody else that I knew that had gone or been going through the same situation as me. So I started telling the story again, still a little bit surface level, did a couple of podcasts, talked to a few people, but then I started the coaching journey. And again, I think my safer audience grew. So more people knew about it, but I still wasn't really letting the outer world know. And to be honest, it's probably only been the last 3 or 4 months that I really went, do you know what? Everyone fucking needs to know this.
Yeah, they do.
Everyone needs to know, because I'm in the messy middle at the moment, and so many other parents are too. And I know of, you know, we looked at the statistics, and in the last 2 decades, the rates of suicide and suicide attempts for under 14-year-olds has tripled. Now, it's still a relatively small amount, but even one kid under 14 dying by suicide is too much. Because, I mean, anybody, but, you know, where the brain is at, you wouldn't think that kids under 14 would even have that thought in their head, is the point I'm trying to get at. So since working with yourself and my other beautiful coaches, I've come to realise that it is a powerful story, and that everyone needs to know, and that it's a really fucking hard journey.
It is. And I guess, and this is the reason that I created like the Nichole Show, because, you know, I actually had feedback the other day. It's so funny. I was doing a Snapchat, and my friend, I think I was out in the sun, it was beautiful, and she's like, oh my God, I love that. That was so beautiful today. Normally your happiness pisses me off. And I was like, oh, that's good. That's good, because I want to do more of the vulnerable stuff. I don't want to always show the, hey, I'm having a good walk and I'm in the sunshine and lollipops, because it's not like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, yes, I've shared my addiction story quite well, but there's so much more to parenting, the guilt, the depression, all the other things that come up, the heartbreak, the separations, the blended families, the navigation of finances, all those things that really do need to be shared, because I don't want anybody to feel alone, let alone a child. But, you know, in those 4 walls, we all get stuck in our head, and we judge ourselves and criticize, and we think that we're alone. And every single person, like coming back to suicide, has had those feelings of what, I don't want to be here. And for me, that was the words that used to go around my head. And, you know, I've had suicidal thoughts, never, you know, never got to that point, thank God. But for me, when I started really working and having a brave enough voice to say it, it's not that I didn't want to be here in this earth. I didn't want to be stuck in this situation. I was stuck in my pajamas. I was stuck in my bed. I'd be stuck feeling miserable and heartbroken or guilty or whatever those feelings are. And so our children are getting way too much stimulation and probably way too much knowledge at those younger ages. And so they think that when they have like maybe an uncomfortable thought or feeling, you know, they've already had an embedded suicide, which I believe is really unhelpful. And I have so many, I don't think the statistics are right. Like I've had so many conversations with people. It is, you know, just crazy.
It's a lot more prevalent than, and the statistics can't reflect because that's only what's been reported, right? So, and that's on that note, you know, like we all have bad thoughts at some time. It is actually really natural to go, this is fucked, I don't want to be here.
Correct.
It is even natural to want to die at points in time. The difference is, as adults, we have a logical brain that actually goes, no, this is just a feeling, let's work through this. But kids, especially kids under 14, don't have that awareness or the awareness of the consequences of their actions. So they have that thought and then they act upon it.
And it's too late.
Yeah. So, you know, that's where suicide awareness and suicide prevention training is so important. And what I think is even more important is actually having that training or those safe talks with kids under 14 and not shying away from it, because
100%.
they need to know that when they have those thoughts, it's okay. It's okay to talk to somebody about it. And that it's normal for everyone to have those thoughts because they actually feel like they're abnormal when they're having those thoughts.
Yeah, feel isolated, feel alone, feel like they don't know where to go. And, you know, so 100%. And yeah, I'm really grateful that I've got you and this community of people to talk about these things with, because yeah, when I was masking and hiding, I never talked about any of this stuff, even in my 20s. So, you know, to bring it to schools, to parents, to know that they're not alone, that whatever their child is going through, they're not going to be judged, or whatever's going on in your home, you're not going to be judged. And if you are, or you're not feeling safe, you don't have those people to talk to, like keep looking, because there are people out there and communities that will help you. That's the biggest thing that, you know, that I've found. And I am going to make some more TikToks on it, but yeah, the amount of coaches and therapists that I've been to, seriously. And, you know, it took a really long time to find the right ones. You know, I've had people that have judged me, that have given bad advice. I had a male psychologist write on a whiteboard about my postnatal depression. And I was way too young. I was young 20s. And I thought that I had to go, you know, through Headspace and through the right people. And why would I go to see a man about postnatal depression? Like, what? Why?
It's funny that you say that,
because
though.
I should have gone to a woman. I should have requested a woman that had been through it, but I just didn't have the resources or tools to know.
But do you want to know what? I had a different experience. So I had postnatal depression after my eldest, and the women who were looking after me, who were helping support me, were fucking awful. And it was when I had a male psychologist that said, what are you doing? It's okay. Like, you don't have to breastfeed. You don't have to do this. You don't. And he was amazing. And he is literally the reason why I was able to.
Well, good example. Because for me, the experience was really bad, and I stopped coaching for a while there because this particular person didn't help me in that situation. Yeah. I've had amazing men coaches as well, but my point is, continue to ask. So if you've got, you know, midwives and nurses telling you to do something and it feels organically wrong with your babies or with your kids, or if you've got a doctor or a coach, just keep asking, because there are somebody that's going to totally be like, I feel seen, I've got this is the right kind of information for me. So yeah, even if this podcast is not the right information, keep scrolling, find the next 100%. Spotify, because there's going to be people out there that is going to be speaking your language and, you know, have the right information for you.
100%.
Is there anything else that you want to ask or share with the audience before we go? Like, you know, biggest takeaway or something that you'd like them to know? Because I don't like the podcast to go too long. We can definitely do a part 2.
Yeah.
But,
no, I think I feel pretty complete. The questions that I had in my brain to ask you, I've asked, which is fantastic. I think the biggest thing that I'd love for everyone to know, especially parents who are struggling with kids and their own capacity, is that they're struggling to parent in what they believe is the way they should be parenting. Because, you know, us as parents, we put so much pressure on ourselves to get it right, to get it perfect, that kind of thing. So, you know, if you are at capacity, but if you are present with your child 100%, but 30% of the time, you're actually doing really well.
Yeah.
So, and that's statistically proven that good enough parenting is, you know, being 100% present 30% of the time. So, So, just know that you are putting the pressure on yourself. And I know society is, you know, we all got to be perfect and blah, blah, blah. But you're not alone. We're all here. Every parenting journey looks different for every single child. But get support, whatever that looks like, best friend, family, whatever.
Get a nanny, get a babysitter. We've both got one because we need it. We need it for our 100%.
Families. We both have a fucking cleaner. You know,
we do.
When you it's the most amazing thing.
Yeah. Outsource when you can afford it, because that does allow time. Like, I love it when my home, you know, is clean. Like yesterday it was cleaned, and then I had the best time having, you know, a family meal around the dinner table. Do I do that every night? No, I do not. But when I do, and the boys are home and Aurora joins in, and, you know, Abs is home on time, like, it's just the best feeling. So, like you said, present 30% of the time, I 100% agree. Like, pick your moments where you can have those windows of time.
Absolutely.
With your children.
Absolutely. And listen to your kids. So something, I guess this is relatively new for me. I work on social media, essentially. So I'm on my phone quite a bit. And when my youngest comes up to me and sort of wants to talk about, and half the time it's random shit, right? I don't always get off. But we have now come to an agreement. My daughter says, Mum, put your phone down. And if she says, Mum, put your phone down, then I put my phone down. And it doesn't matter what comes out of her mouth after that, as long as I'm giving her 100% presence. And generally, she only wants to talk to me for 30 seconds and she's done. Her cup's filled because I've put my phone down. But I wasn't always doing that. It took, admittedly, my daughter is quite aware of herself. So, you know, not all kids will do that. But this is something, if you're starting to realize that you're doing these things, because all parents do it. If you're starting to realize that your kid is asking for your attention, and it feels inconvenient to you, that's probably the time where you need to make it convenient.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, just spend the 2 minutes. Spend the 2 minutes being 100% present, and it will change the connection of the relationship.
I love that. I do that with Aurora most mornings because she's got emotions. And so if I can negotiate a way to get her happy, whether it's playing with her, or sometimes I even have to do a mini trip to the pole studio before kindy or something. But yeah, it is a really good advice, and I do need reminders of that because we all do it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being in the studio, and please like, share. If you have questions for us, we're happy to do a part 2. Nick's socials, the Patchwork Parent, will be underneath as well. And if anybody else wants to be on the podcast or ask me questions, I would love to have you on it. So
awesome.
Have a really beautiful, blessed day, and we'll talk to you all super soon.